Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to another episode of the 757 Renaissance Man podcast. Today, we are going to be blessed and highly favored. I have one of 757's own, and he comes from a dynamic family here in the 757. I am sitting here with Pastor Cedric Rouson. How are you doing, sir?
I'm well, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Man, so you are one of those flamboyant, teaching, playing preachers. It's a lot to unpack here, man.
Okay.
Not only are you one of my favorite preachers, but you're also one of my favorite musicians.
Wow.
And I want to know, how do you balance both?
So my late godfather, Bishop Donnie Graves, he was actually doing premarital counseling with my wife and I. So we're talking now, 10 years ago or more. And he made a statement in the premarital counseling. He said, when God elevates you, he adds, he doesn't take away. And his point was in terms of gifting. He was saying when God elevates you, God adds to your plate. He's not going to take away a gift he's already given you. So then your responsibility is to figure out how to find the balance with everything you have, you know. And for me, that probably is the best word I can use to sum it up. It's about balance. And then the other word I throw in is understanding assignment, being able to understand what moment requires what gift, and then submitting to that without feeling the need to display, oh, well, I can do this too. Well, I can do that too. No, if I'm called to be the organist at a homegoing, I don't need to get a microphone and show people that I know a scripture too. So for me, it's really been about living in the balance and being humble with managing the responsibility that comes with the opportunities or the assignments that I get.
Mm-hmm. I've kind of looked briefly at your history, and I can see even in education, you've balanced both. Let's go down that road. What led you to this point, starting with high school? Which high school did you go to?
All right. So I went to Oscar Smith, actually from Chesapeake, and my junior year, end of my junior year, my father had a stroke. And we ended up moving. My parents had bought a new home in Portsmouth. And so we ended up transferring to Churchland. So I actually graduated from Churchland High School, though I was only there for my senior year. But I spent my school days in Chesapeake. Graduated, went to Hampton University, was a music major. I ended up dropping out my freshman year for a few complicated reasons, mainly just being young and making just some unhealthy decisions, I think, at that time, following other people and just not being serious about my own path. It wasn't until around the time that my mother would pass away, or just before then, that I picked back up with education. And so I actually went to Regent, a university, for undergrad, and transferred to Liberty because they were cheaper, to be frank.
Okay.
And, but you get what you pay for. And so I ended up doing the majority of my undergrad at Liberty University, which was quite an interesting journey. I ended up being able to finish out at Richmond, Virginia Seminary. When I went to Virginia Union, it was the polar opposite of Liberty in terms of ideology, theology, and so and even objective, because of course at that point seminary is not Bible college at all. So we did the 3 years at Virginia Union, got the master's, and then now I'm back at Regent. So it's kind of come full circle. I remember the Lord told me my second year at Virginia Union, I want you to get a doctor. I want you to get your doctorate in leadership.
Mhm.
And that was weird for me because most of the guys I knew, friends of mine, were going after preaching degrees, DMins, and most of them with a concentration in some form of homiletics. And the Lord spoke to me very clearly one night. I want you to study leadership. That was going to be the missing piece. And so the closer I got to understanding it, my passion led me to a doctor of strategic leadership. It's called the DSL, which is a newer program, and very few schools have it. So guess what two schools it came down to again? Liberty and Regent. And to be honest with you, man, because we're being honest right in this moment, I was petrified because the first thought I had is, what are my colleagues going to say? We've been at Virginia Union. We're all black power, black,
Right.
Social justice, and now I'm talking about going to a PWI and at that, a very conservative school like Regent.
Very Republican,
Very
conservative.
Republican, very right.
Yeah.
And what I've actually found, man, is as controversial as the move was for me, it was God's will, because not only has it exposed me to information that sometimes we don't get or perspectives that we don't get, but it also put me in an atmosphere that I think in a way provides a balance for what my ministry platform is ultimately supposed to be. So that's how we got to where we are.
I've noticed a lot of, especially growing up in this area and being surrounded by, we have a large amount of HBCUs that most places don't have such a concentration like we do.
Yeah.
And I've noticed from talking to different people, sometimes you need that duality. I think that as African American, or let's just go say Black folks, I think you should at least experience, even if it's just a semester of HBCU, because that kind of helps let you know. I believe sometimes you won't know your history unless you go there,
Correct.
But also have the duality to go to a PWI, because that shows you how the world works.
Right.
And I think that we're in a very unique situation with the schools that we have in this area.
I agree. I agree. And just to say a word to the piece that you mentioned about the difference, both are needed. We need to be educated about our culture, and frankly, no one's going to give us that but our own. I am pro HBCU 100%. My wife is a graduate of Bennett in Greensboro with her undergrad, and ironically, in the same sense, a graduate of Liberty for her master's. So again, the two extremes. But I think, when it comes to the heritage, there's so much I gained from my time at Hampton and from my time at VUU. But I also think that when it comes to learning how the world around us works, how the systems work, it doesn't it doesn't hurt to be a Joseph who gets to go to Egypt to figure out, how the economy runs. Because a lot of times they're not giving that information or displaying that to us within the circles in which we exist. Doesn't mean we don't have it at all, or that we don't have any, but in terms of the level of access, there is a difference. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. There is a difference, and I have seen and experienced, the difference. And few people are willing to step outside of the comfort zone to experience what's needed for the assignment. Again, I don't have a dog in the fight. I think a person ought to be led by the Spirit as to what to do. But I do feel for me and for my purpose path, I'm grateful that I made the move I made. There are a couple of days that I wonder, right? But I'm grateful for the move I made. And surprisingly, I use my voice. I speak out. I write about things. I speak out about things. I'm open about my convictions and how I feel and what my ideologies are. But I am grateful to sort of have the balance between those extremes.
Yes. So what were you like as a child? I go through these questions, especially with the I grew up a church kid. We all grew up in the same circles.
Mhm.
It's not hard in this area. All you gotta do is go to a couple revivals and you done met everybody. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
growing up a PK myself, I know that people sometimes have assumptions about how we live and how we come up. And one thing I like to highlight when I do interview my church folks is telling the real and what it really was like coming up, because we weren't born. I don't say we weren't born um, churchy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And you have the same, if not even harder. Um, what's the word? How I want to say this? Expectations growing up.
Mhm.
So, were you bad, little boy?
So honestly, maybe in my head, um, definitely wasn't perfect. I think I was fairly a normal kid, but the thing I'll say is I started playing the piano when I was 3.
Mhm,
So by most accounts, people would consider me to have probably been a child prodigy,
mhm,
even though I didn't say it that way.
mhm.
But between that and being a PK, you grow up with a certain sense of social pressure
Exactly.
that that made it awkward.
Mhm,
So I didn't really do clubs and stuff like that, but it wasn't because I was against it or was holy. It was because I would go in there dance and they could tell I'd be from church,
right.
you know.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I talked to girls and stuff in school, but I never really had a my hard truth, like, real, relationships. My girlfriends would have been somebody from the choir or something
Mhm,
like that. It wasn't that I didn't have that. Now, one of the things I'm grateful for my parents about is they let us live our lives.
mhm,
So because church puts you in a fishbowl, and as a PK, you're kind of living behind a glass wall. My parents tried to do their best to shield us in that sense. But I mean, I got in trouble like anybody else did,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, just a normal kid, but I think I spent more time kind of introverted in a way
Mhm,
because my interests were peaked. By the time I was 7, I was writing music,
mhm.
and our minister of music had bought me the first 2 James Hall CDs. Man,
Mhm.
I was done, to hear
Right.
this sound
Right.
from New York. So my focus was there. I
Yeah.
was writing music and I'm doing stuff at my own age, trying to figure out how to produce little stuff. So, my intrigue, probably my curiosity, um, with my gift or talent or interest, probably shielded me from some things. But again, in other ways, man, I was just as normal as anybody else, got
Mhm,
in trouble like everybody else, got tempted like everybody else, did crazy stuff like most other people. But I kind of always knew, even as a young child, that I had an assignment. I didn't know always what it was,
mhm.
but I felt like I was chosen for something. And I think that was the nagging voice in my mind that in my head that often pulled me back from
Mhm,
some of the things I wanted to do that I didn't get to, because I had a list of stuff
mhm.
I probably wanted to do like other people, and for me it didn't play out that way.
You ain't miss much. So you said
Yeah.
that you started playing at 3. Was it a byproduct? Like I tinker on the keyboards and piano, but because I'm a
Mhm.
church kid, you
Mhm.
spend a lot of time, especially being a PK. You spend a lot of downtime at the church while your parents are handling business. And that's how I started. Just I'm bored. There's a piano here. Let's start tinkling on it. Is
Mhm.
that the same story for you?
Sort of, yeah, definitely that part. But the piece I have to add, man, a lot of people don't know. My father was a very gifted um, um, musician, piano player, trumpet player, and in some ways our stories were similar. I started younger than he did, and I can't remember if he had formal lessons or not. He may have, but he played for the junior choir at First Baptist Church Campus Sulla as a kid and that kind of thing. So when I was very very young, my parents bought me this keyboard. It may have been about that big. It's like a Fisher Price,
Mhm,
but I remember it because that's where I learned to play. And
mhm,
I remember to this day, my father showed me my first run on the
mhm,
keyboard.
Mhm.
He was the first person to show me how to play shout music, you
Mhm.
know. So he was present in that picture too. And then you couple that with, yeah, we're at church late, and instead of falling asleep, I'm intrigued because there's a piano over there. It took me a minute to catch on to the organ. And I remember we had a mother at our church who lived next door, and she came to me one day. I don't know, I might have been 3, 4, 5 years old. And she came to me and said, don't you bang on that piano? Don't you play that piano? That's holy equipment.
Right, right.
I know what that was, right?
Uh-huh.
Sanctified. That's holy. You don't play that. And so my father sort of introduced me to the church. Never will forget this. This might have been 1993, 92. Actually, I don't know the year, man. It may have been sooner than that. Dr. Marvin Duke had come to our church from Chesapeake Christian Center. And our organist, who was supposed to be there that night to play for praise and worship, didn't show up. And I remember asking my dad, could I play?
Mhm.
And I walked to the organ for what I can remember to be the first time. And I was so short, I had to stand up on the pedals because I couldn't sit down and my feet reached the pedals.
Okay.
And I played,
Mhm.
and people were kind of mesmerized. And I guess it kind of goes from there. But as far back as I can remember, I remember playing. My aunt, Brenda, passed away in 1991. For some reason, I remember this. I was born in 86. Um, I remember not going to her homegoing.
Mhm.
My sister and I didn't go. We stayed with a sitter. And I remember then watching the video of one of our organists who played the service,
Mhm.
wishing I could have been there to play. So that tells you how far back I've been playing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'd always compare um our local musicians, especially our church musicians. Like I say, Peggy Britt is our local Shirley Caesar.
Okay.
I tend to compare you and your siblings as the Gospel Jacksons.
Wow. I've never heard that before.
If the Jacksons had a gospel group, it would be you and your
Wow.
siblings.
Okay.
So was it a natural thing between you guys growing up with music with each other? Did you make each other better? Did you, write songs together? How was that growing up in that household?
So pretty much yes. What I'll say is my brother and I are 5 years apart, and so all of us played something. My cousin Kevin was in the house with us too. He and my brother are a couple of months apart, so they grew up together. And then my sister and I are 19 months apart, so we grew up together, but we were all close. So both Kevin and Ray played drums. My brother later, picked up bass. My sister was a singer, and I was a keyboard player. So I don't know. We should have
See,
formed a band,
Gospel
right?
Jackson, see?
Yeah. So I remember again going back to maybe 7 years old. I started writing music, and my sister was my choir. I had a one-member choir, and we literally would take. I figured out how to record on a cassette tape, and then how to overdub by take another cassette and play, and then record the sound. And we literally, I still have a box of cassette tapes, some of which contain old songs that she and I would create together. We never ever, put them out. Songs that we would create together and record. So yeah, I mean, we kind of naturally fused together that type of way. Though we never performed as a family in that official sense, we've been rolling together for a long time, and to this day, though our paths are taking us in our own respective places, our chemistry, even musically, is just like that. To this day, I've played with a lot of bass players, I've played with a lot of drummers, I've played for a lot of singers, but the chemistry that we share is unique because we've walked together for so many years.
Yes, yes. All transparency, I have contacted your siblings, and um, as I also want to do separate interviews, but I want
Okay,
to interview you guys together
that'd be cool.
as a
It's
whole,
never been done before.
right?
We've never done it before.
And I think it would. I think it's one of the things where I could probably put y'all in a room and step back and know everything that happened
Yeah,
on its own.
yeah.
So
That would be cool.
let's talk about touring. And I know that you have toured internationally. Where is your favorite location? What's been your favorite location to tour?
Italy all day,
Mhm.
and the culture and the food. You know, all day. And I've done Switzerland, and I've played in India and some other places. Um, Italy all day. I've always gone at Christmas time. I've done Denmark too. I've always gone at Christmas time, and so for them, because in Italy, there really isn't a Protestant, witness or much of one for the church. It's Catholicism all day. It's
Yeah.
Rome is the
Right
epicenter.
there, right, yeah.
So right, so um, Christmas time becomes their main season for gospel.
Mhm.
So they have all of these festivals and concerts and things like that. And to go from city to city has always been just a rewarding feeling. I actually enjoyed the tour life, if you will.
Mhm.
On the bus, sleep by day, alone space. I'm kind of introverted, so the idea of being in the back of the bus for me with headphones on, I'm in heaven. You leave me alone. If I got an iPad that works or a computer, I'm good. We go in, we meet the people, we play the show, we get to do the music every night. The energy is there. So I would say Italy, man, by far has been my favorite experience. Yeah.
Do you think the interaction with the music and the crowd is different? For example, when you play down south, when you're playing the route because the mother of the church is going to let you know.
Hmm.
You're going to get that call and response. Do you have that same type of feel out of the country?
No.
Mhm.
So when
And
you
with that
play,
said, is it
uh,
kind of weird? You have to adjust getting used to that.
you do. And the first time it really kind of it threw me for a loop. Now, one, I should say, my very first tour, I played drums on the tour.
Okay.
So that was interesting because I didn't play keys, maybe with exception, maybe like one song a night. But the thing there is they don't respond the way we do. So you don't know you're doing a good job till it's over.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you're preaching or singing, because I have done both overseas, they're not talk back, clap back. And if it's an enjoyable song, they'll clap with you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very much like watching theater.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I've noticed is when the spirit moves, things like that, you'll see people crying and that sort of thing. But for the most part, you will probably think you are boring them until it's over, and they flood you
Uh-huh.
with compliments, with appreciation, with gratitude. We've had people try to give us gifts. I mean, all kind of stuff. We've had people give their life to Christ
Mm-hmm.
on tour. And again, we would have never thought in the moment that
Mm-hmm.
these people are electrified until you get to, of course, the end of a concert and you're doing the encore and stuff. But it's a very different culture, and you have to adjust because if not, then the insecurity that you may bring to that moment may keep you from doing your best work.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to experience that.
I
Definitely.
would love to experience it again. That was one of the things. I actually went my last tour right before COVID. Is
Mm-hmm.
ironically of 2019. I got the call from Earl Bynum, and I want to shout him out because the majority of my musical travel internationally has been playing for him down through the years. And this last time, I don't think he thought I was going to say yes because by now I've got a child and
Right.
pastoring the church and in school and all of that. And but I said, yeah, man, let's rock. And we went, and I was so glad I did because, of course, I had no clue
Mm-hmm.
that the virus was right around the corner
Right.
and that
Yeah.
it would reshape travel and all of that. So yeah,
Shout out to
I
Earl
would
Bynum.
love to go back. Yeah, shout
Earl,
out, man.
Earl did the show a couple of weeks ago. So,
Okay,
yeah. Actually, his episode will probably be right before your episode.
gotcha.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, what was it like being. All right. So, when you met your wife, were you a
Mhm.
pastor yet?
No.
Okay. So, tell us what it's like tell us the story of how you met your wife.
All right. So the long story short is, I had actually attempted to rekindle a relationship with an ex,
Mm-hmm.
and it was it was a long shot. It had been years, and we had kind of crossed paths again. And you know how you just want to see if it's something there,
Mhm.
still have a residue in your heart. Well, it didn't work out,
Mhm.
and that she moved on. And I remember saying to myself at that point, kind of heartbroken at my failed attempt, and I was like, you know what? I'm just not even going to really try my hand right now at relationships. I'm done with it. It is what it is. I probably said that the beginning of March
Okay.
of 2009, and within a month, I met Nadia. We
Mhm.
met through some mutual friends. Shout out Pastor Derry Haywood and Marquita from Richmond. He was at our church at the time. He was actually serving with me in music ministry, and I think Nadia had just come with Marquita to the church to drop off something for Derry or something like that.
Mhm.
Now, what's funny is I didn't know we had just dedicated our church, the church I now pastor, and she was at the service to
Okay.
support her friend Derry, and we had no clue that we went, you know, that we both were in the same room. And when we met, it was not love at first sight, particularly not on her part.
Mhm.
We literally just formed a friendship. A lot of people don't know that my wife is 6 years older than me,
Okay.
so that might be a part of why there was love at first sight. Like, who's this little boy, you know? And so we just formed a slow friendship, and that friendship morphed into what it, you know, into what it became. So, you know, now my hunch is if you listen to my version of the story in detail and listen to hers, mine is probably better because she has edited out the parts where she gave me a hard time, right?
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, man, I mean that's kind of our story. That it just happened at a space where, and I always say I think my disappointment made room.
Mhm.
You know, it put me in a position where because I wasn't looking for it, then I wasn't overdoing it.
Okay.
So it was like instead of me being on the search for a girlfriend, it allowed me to be open to a friendship,
Mhm.
and that friendship then morphed into what we had.
Yeah. And see that, and that goes back into my whole lines of showing the human side of a minister,
Mm-hmm.
because we fall in love, we get hurt, we
Oh yeah.
have the same desires as anybody else. It's just your walk is a little bit different. Well, your walk is
Yep.
a lot different. So how is it finding the balance in between that without being over churchy? Because that is I think is a point you can be over churchy
Oh yeah.
and seeing almost like an average person when it comes to dealing with relationships and dating.
Well, one, I don't drink my own Kool-Aid,
Mm,
if such Kool-Aid exists. I'm kind of a what you see is what you get kind of person. I don't like to put on airs. I'm not the ambitious type, and I don't say any of this to knock anybody, okay?
mm,
But I'm not the type of person that's walking around handing out my business card trying to be somebody. Um, and most importantly, I am very, very aware of my humanity and of the fact that I am a person.
mm,
So, and I really learned this from my father. I would hear him say, "Pastoring is what I do; it's not who I am."
mm. Okay.
You see, and I adopted that. So, for me, when it comes down to having a life or just relaxing or being human or enjoying a marriage or raising a family, that's not hard for me. My wife doesn't call me past at home. We don't have the type of culture or climate in our family where I'm trying to parade my title. Um, when I leave church on a Sunday and I'm taking that drive home, a part of what I enjoy, if you will, is disrobing or undressing, pulling off some of the weight and the layers that comes with the ministry moment
Mm,
to just be myself. Being home is an oasis. Being
mm,
a dad, being a husband, just being a friend, that doesn't bother me. That actually refuels me and it gives me joy. So I cling to it,
mm,
and I don't say that to say that I'm I negate my pastoral responsibility, nothing like that. But what I'm saying is that I'm not caught up in the hype.
mm,
I don't believe the hype, and as a result of that, it allows me to take joy in being transparent. I love the moments when people say something like, "Man, I didn't know you were down to earth." I enjoy those moments because I'm like, well, what did you expect me to be?
Mhm.
Like, I'm a guy, I'm a dude like you.
Right.
I'm just a guy, man. We each have an opportunity, we each have an assignment, everybody's got a part to play, but I'm just a regular guy like anybody else. And because that's what I believe in my core, then I live that out every day.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
By the way, congratulations on the
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
new
man.
baby.
Yeah, he's keeping us up every night, as you can imagine.
So this is not your first.
No, second child.
Second
So we
child.
have a 6-year-old,
Okay.
and now Caden is he's 2 weeks. So yeah, so Creedon and Caden, and Creed's been a great big brother so far, and Caden is a precious baby. But you know, sometimes I feel like, why do we wait so long to do this again? Because now we're a little older than we were,
Right.
obviously, 6 years ago. So the long nights and early mornings, but man, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
One of the things I like, and you kind of touched on it earlier, is I like the way I've heard quite a few of your sermons, and you have a plain way of speaking, whereas some pastors go through these verbal athletics. That you have a down to earth way of expressing it. And just recently, it's a snippet of one of your sermons when you was preaching. I was talking about when you guys were on tour and how you used to end it out with the Michael Jackson song. And one of the lines that I love so much was when you were telling the young ladies that during the pandemic, you could have been with somebody else, but you chose to be alone because you're searching for your Boaz and not your dumb.
Oh my God. First of all, you have to know my wife shrinks when I make those kind of statements. She puts her head down and she says, Rouson, stop, because she knows it gets me in trouble. Anyway,
I don't know about getting it. It brings back to what we were talking about, the humanity of a pastor. You can't speak above the people you're pastoring to.
Right.
And you got to realize, yes, we do have people that are holier than thou, but we do also have people that's trying to find their way. Right. And I think a line like that makes somebody sit up and be like, hold up, he gets it.
Yeah. First of all, Holy Spirit leads and guides. And I can't overstate that. My father, though, is sort of my model for that. My father is probably the best preacher I've ever heard in my life. Just a master orator, because he understands the weight of having good content and having a good way to communicate it. He didn't sacrifice one for the other. So he had revelation, but he also had style. And one of my father's styles was, and he is, to use common language, to use references that appeal to people's everyday lives, to state a point or make a point come to life. And I grew up, I guess because I grew up with that type of preaching, it really just becomes natural for me to do the same thing. And let me say this, if I can, it's probably been a saving grace for me. Particularly in moments where, and to know me, I actually don't like platform preaching. My insecurity struggles with that. But when I have been on some platforms with, very academic, very scholarly preaching, and I love to hear it. Sometimes I don't know how good I am at duplicating it. But my saving grace has been in the 2 or 3 seconds before I stand up there, I have to slap myself and say, be yourself. And what I learn is when I get up and I exhale and I do what I always do the way I do it, it actually worked. The message went across with the people, and that becomes affirming for me, because what I've learned is that the pew, the average pew, even those intelligent in the pew, don't really care about who you read. They care that you read, but they're not interested in how fancy you can arrange your words. They want to know, what are you trying to say?
Mhm.
And is God saying this? And what do I need to do with it? And I've just learned to cut to that chase. So thank you, man, for even pointing that out. I think that's affirming in a way, because sometimes I question if that's the right approach, but it's been working for me, so far.
I've been lucky enough to have grown up in, I attend New Hope Baptist Church. Sam
Hmm.
Logan is a pastor.
Yeah.
Before Pastor Logan, we had Reverend Sidney Foster.
Hmm.
And both of them are very teaching preachers,
Hmm.
more than you need to do this, you need to do that. You feel like you come out with having learned something, or with the desire to learn something and go into it. And I feel that you are also in that same vein. And when
Wow.
you are a minister in that vein, you can get more across to your congregation.
I agree. Thank you. First of all, that humbles me, man. But I do agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
You can get more. You don't really see in the Gospels where Jesus pulled people away on a mountain and yelled at them,
Mm-hmm.
right? He would teach them. He'd even teach them from a ship on, amidst the waves
Mm-hmm.
and the currents. Jesus understood as a communicator how to start where people were and then bring them. That's what the Sermon on the Mount was about. He would say, "You've heard it said in the days of old, but I say unto you." That means he's starting with what they already know
Mm-hmm.
and then brings them from information into revelation. This is what you know already. This is what you heard. Now I'm going to take that and reshape it in a contemporary context to show you God's ultimate eternal truth behind whatever it was you thought you knew. To me, that's what preaching ought to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I strive for that.
I want to ask you this. All right, so my show, yes, I'm a church kid, and yes, I
Mm-hmm.
do have pastors and ministers and other church people on, but I
Mm-hmm.
also have friends that are rappers, entertainers, entrepreneurs, and I have them on too. So my question to you: What is your who? Well, okay, what is your favorite non-gospel style music, and who do you listen to when you're not listening to gospel music?
All right. Ironically, it's going to be two different answers. I love jazz.
Mm-hmm.
I really like any kind of, pretty much any type of music. Most genres of music. Not really like a heavy metal kind of guy, but
Mm-hmm.
most genres of music, I'm game for. But I love the smoothness of jazz, but I also like that big band swing jazz type feel too.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it really depends on the mood I'm in. It could be from a PJ Morton to a Stevie Wonder
Mm-hmm.
to Frank Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
Love his music.
Mm-hmm.
To Michael Jackson. To her.
Mm-hmm.
To you name them. It just depends on the mood I'm in at the time. Because I love music the way I do. Now, my love for music is very interesting because I don't know all the lyrics to all the songs. Like
Okay.
my sister is that person. She knows every lyric to every song ever
But
made. That's
that's
not me.
you're more of an instrumental type of person. She's a singer, so I can see that.
Exactly. So she's gonna do that.
Yeah.
For me, the music becomes something I absorb.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm I actually like it the most. I like to listen to music the most at night,
Mm-hmm.
riding in the car, which is rare nowadays in the pandemic that I'm riding in the car in the evening as much, but I enjoy it. So it just depends on the mood I'm in. But I definitely listen to all kinds of music. Ray Charles, Art Tatum. I mean, I'm naming a lot of older cats because I have an infatuation with history
Mm-hmm.
in terms of culture, particularly our history and Black culture, but history in general. So I love even to see movies that are taped to represent the 20s or the
Mm-hmm.
50s or the 60s or the civil rights struggle, things like that.
Funny
I
thing,
love that.
that's how I came up with the 757 Renaissance Man, the Harlem
You got it.
Renaissance. And there was
Exactly.
so
So,
many you had artists and poets and musicians and all
yeah.
concentrated in the Harlem Renaissance back then kind of
Yeah.
reminds me what we could have going on here in the Hampton Roads area.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I don't know that I have a. If I had to choose a favorite, I'm gonna say anything that's PJ Morton, man, all day.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I just rock with him. I think he understands because he comes from the church. He gets church
Yes.
and infuses church into his music in a way that it appeals to us. And because his music isn't vulgar,
Mm-hmm.
then he became safe for the church kids to
To
listen
like.
to,
Mm-hmm.
and we get to say, oh, that's Bishop Paul Morton's son.
Right.
He's
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
He's on the okay list. So
Mama, we can listen to
he's gonna
this.
probably be my all time. He's my all time favorite. I love his chord arrangements, just his approach to music, how he uses simplicity to bring out genius. His whole song might exist on 4 chord changes, but he works it. So yeah, I mean, any given day, it'd be PJ is the go-to. Now, my wife is a '90s R&B hip hop head, so you come to my house and Alexa's liable. We're gonna have over company or something like that, and she gets in her mood, or let's say she's cleaning up. We're cleaning up the house. She's gonna put on Lauryn Hill. She's gonna put on, or she's gonna go hip hop, and so we kind of do it, man. Some of all of it, really.
Yeah. Coming up, were you allowed to listen to other music in the household?
Oh yes, yeah. Now, what I'll say is, it was kind of like do it at your own risk. My father wouldn't say much, but my mom, that holiness in my mother, if the language was gonna be vulgar or something like that, then you got to be careful, because she come in speaking in tongues, cast the devil out. But they allowed us to live, man.
I got banned from the family stereo. I have so everybody that knows me knows I'm a hip hop head. I love hip hop, specifically 80s, 90s hip hop. And this was the time where NWA came out.
Okay.
And now that, we can be scholarly about it, and we can talk about how they were ahead of their time. Back then, they was just some cussing Negroes,
Right.
And I forgot, I was listening to the Eazy-E tape, and I forgot to take it out to stereo. And so I get my love of music from my parents, specifically my mother. My mother she surprised me once I got older and saw the variety of music that she listened to, even though I knew, she was a soloist at Hampton University in the gospel choir,
Wow.
So that surprised me. But one day, I think she used the stereo more than anybody in the house. Saturday morning, clean up, she goes to press the button thinking that she's going to hear Luther Vandross.
Right.
And anybody that's listening that knows the very first Eazy-E tape, and I have to say tape because that was the time, knows that it starts out with a very specific bit of profanity. Like, he started out to let you know what you were about to hear.
Right.
And she heard that. Yeah. I think that I was banned from the stereo until I turned at least 18. I think I had to have I was old enough to have my own stereo before I can control the music in the house again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny, man.
Yeah.
But I get it.
Yeah. So, do you also, I know you're a well-studied musician. Are you also able to play by ear?
It's the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It's I'm actually very little studied.
Okay.
So I mainly play by ear. I actually didn't. So I played in the orchestra. I was actually first chair string bassist I started off on cello in 5th grade, picked up bass in 6th grade, and did it through my freshman year. But I could read the bass clef, but I couldn't really read music till I went to Hampton. And that was one of my regrets in not sticking it through with Hampton as a music major. But a part of why I didn't, to get into that story, is because I didn't read music, so much so that I tried to skip my audition, and I got caught. So I was a music engineering major. I went to music engineering because I figured that, music engineering, that's like running a studio. Right. Certainly, they're not going to make you have to do recitals and stuff. Yeah, I was wrong. And so when I figured out that I had to audition and I had to learn how to read, and Dr. I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name now, and I know it if I didn't have to say it. Hopefully his name will come to me soon. But they were very nice about it. They worked me into the program, and I was so petrified about reading that my first recital, I actually wrote a gospel song to the tune to remember how to play it.
Okay.
So very little trained. I play mostly by ear. At this stage in my life, I regret it because there's certain opportunities you have to be able to fluently read in order to really maximize. So yeah, just to give that note of clarity, man. I mean, I'm mainly by ear, and I have picked up theory along the way.
Okay.
And to that end, I have a profound respect for colleagues of mine who have really dug into the book, have done the work. I just think they deserve to be in a class all by themselves.
Do you think that your children, I know it might be a little bit early for the baby, but do you think your children also have that music bug?
So I do. What my wife and I committed to do was to let them come into it on their own.
Mm.
So my oldest, he loves to. Most kids at that age love drums, but he really doesn't care for drums. He actually we had somebody who gave us a drum set. I finally gave it away to his cousin because he didn't want to play it.
Mm.
He likes keyboard. He likes to play around on keyboard, and it's specific to the point that on his iPad he asked me to download a keyboard app, and so he follows the keys. So he's learning, but I haven't started really teaching. I'll show him some little stuff, but I haven't really started aggressively teaching him because I just don't think it's sunk deep enough into him yet to commit to it. I think right now it's just fun, so he enjoys it, but he doesn't bang. He will play notes. I would love if one of my boys would pick it up because that's just at this point sort of the legacy.
Mm.
I got it from, my father played, I played. I'd love for them to play, but I'm equally as content if they don't.
I find that the younger generations um, aren't as interested in playing instruments like we were. Like I came up in a church, so I came up tinkering on the piano. I went to a church where one of the things you did was you were in the band. I went
Right.
to D Creek High School, and it was at least two or three of us in every grade from my church into the band. So much so they used to call us the little New Hope Gang in the band.
Wow.
But I don't see that need to play quote unquote real instruments
Right.
in the younger generation where they're more so into, and even when coming up, my mom used to be like, I don't want you on the keyboards and synthesizer, I want you to play piano. But
Mm-hmm.
now it's even beyond that where they don't even really play keyboard. It's these drum machines and
Right.
sequencers and
Right.
mixers.
Right.
How do you think that's going to affect the later generations in music?
Well, one, I think there'll always be a remnant in any generation with anything. You'll always have people who carry on the sort of the continuity of whatever was passed down. But by and large, everything is digital.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the problems with it is, as you, I think, have stated or at least alluded to, they're kind of being a lost art.
Mm-hmm.
I fear that, honestly.
Like
I
you can play a synthesized saxophone, but
right,
it's something about that nuance of knowing how to make your
absolutely.
mouth,
Yep,
massage certain notes
that's right.
that I think that they're just missing out on.
Yeah, I mean, it's nowadays you can literally sit at a computer without knowing anything about music at all.
Mm-hmm.
You can sit in these programs and click buttons that play patterns or drag loops
Mm-hmm.
and create entire songs without knowing how to play anything. So, that does alarm me because again, I think we lose the art. And the thing that makes music is the art. It's that it's not so computerized, that it's not so predictable. So I am concerned about that. I think there will always be, as I said, a number of purists,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, who try to keep the art alive. But I also have to admit to, we have to change with the times when it comes to certain things, and evolve as the times change. I just hope that our kids will find an interest. Now, I have to say this. I think a part of that is up to us, and it's up to us based upon how we treat our children when they're young.
Mhm.
So, in other words, a child is not going to be inclined to want to learn a piano or saxophone or drum if that child's social time is consumed on an iPad, a tablet, or in front of a television or a game system.
Mhm.
I think there has to be a balance of that. That while they're young, we have to teach them to respect boundaries and to have time. So, like in our home, there are times we take the iPad away or things like that, and we'll say, "No, you don't get any of that right now.
Mhm.
Go play with your toys, or go pick up a book, or go." We force him in a way to create balance because it's hard to have appreciation where there is no balance for it because I don't have an appetite for it because I'm consumed by the thing that I always crave and enjoy. So a part of that is on us. It's
Mhm.
not just their attention spans and things like that. It's what are we exposing them to? What do we give them? And even when it comes to church, think about it. When we were growing up, our musicians, for the most part, were a part of the ministry, or were, if they weren't, it was some family friend or somebody common, right?
Mhm.
Or the idea was, when I was going to church, man, we had like five drummers. We had the main guy,
Mhm.
but then after the main guy, we had like four or five guys who all came to church every Sunday with drumsticks, fighting for the chance to get their
Right.
song.
Right.
Nowadays, we have traded disciples for professionals.
Mhm.
And I'm not knocking any of this. Let me
Mhm.
go on record for those hearing or viewing the podcast. This is not me coming for anybody. But we have become so consumed in the modern church with being excellent
Mhm.
that now we've traded everything for professionals. So think about it. Nowadays, you've got a drum locked in a drum cage that can't nobody touch.
Mhm.
Or you go to the church and the cymbals are all gone if service is not there. Or you've got a keyboard so complicated that a young person in your church won't be able to work it. I learned how to play because I could go over to the piano, the upright at the church, and play it. I don't even know that our church cultures are conducive anymore. And maybe a remedy to this, if it gives me an idea, is to create sort of a music or arts arm
Mhm.
to youth ministry.
Mhm.
Instead of just having a music ministry, to create that modality within youth ministry and give them access to instrumentation that they can play with. But honestly, man, and at my church is critical to the same thing. Now, JJ is my drummer, JJ Lassiter. It's
Mhm.
nothing for him over the years to take a young person and give him a pair of sticks and sit down and show them how to play. My guys are open to that kind of thing, but I'm just saying, as a culture,
Mhm.
we have created such a professional culture in church now, and even the church parishioners, and I'm sorry because I know I'm veering off your question, but even the parishioners are in such a rush to get out of church when church is over,
Mhm.
if they come,
Right. Right.
that we don't get that time spent with the children in the context of the main service. So we don't know what young people may have a gift being cultivated in a specific way unless that person makes themselves known, their parents make them known to us. So I think there's just some things, there's some work that needs to be done from all sides
Mhm.
to recreate a culture that that provides opportunity for kids to show their interest, particularly in music.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
So one final question before I get ready to let you go.
All right.
Do you prefer the organ or the piano?
Whew. So let me say, I consider myself an organist who plays the piano.
Okay.
I don't feel that I have the greatest dexterity for piano, um, but I enjoy it.
Mhm.
So it literally goes back to the prior question of music. It depends on the mood I'm in. Actually, lately I have been craving going somewhere where there is a baby grand.
Mhm.
I want not a keyboard. I want a baby grand, and that's tuned well, and I want to be locked in there for like 2 or 3 hours.
Mhm.
I've been craving that, and I just haven't made any phone calls. I might make some phone calls to some people and see, with COVID going on, a lot of places, may not be open,
Well,
to that. But
let me talk to Pastor Logan because we got a baby grand at the Hope Center,
got you. Yeah,
and maybe I could bring my camera and we can see what happens.
man, I love to. I just love to because there's a purity there
Mhm.
that I don't get. I sat down on the organ, the other day. So I enjoy it, but most of the playing that I do now, I'm playing to record.
Mhm.
I'm playing from behind the scenes to just be able to sit down with no agenda and just play whatever comes to mind, and maybe have a notepad handy if I start writing something. But to just play,
Mhm.
oh man,
Yeah.
that would probably be that might be a missing element of what I need right now. Because for me, music at its core, I mean, that's simple, to just sit at the instrument and play. It calms my spirit and it brings me back in here. When I get stressed out, a part of my detox is music.
Mhm.
Whether it's, again, riding in the car and I'm listening to it with the windows down, or whether it's playing it. And so, yeah, it just depends, man. I mean, I love the organ. I grew up playing the organ, but it seems here more lately I've had a craving to just play the piano.
Well, we're gonna make
Um,
that happen.
yeah.
We're gonna make that happen. I was
Let
quite
me
the
know.
opposite, where, and this is one of the reasons I admire you so. I grew up playing the piano, and I've had
Okay.
piano lessons from the time I was 8 to the time I graduated from high school.
Mhm.
But it's something about that organ I just could not. It seems like it's just so much going on,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting here trying to concentrate on the right note.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But you're one of
I
those.
I always loved the organ, though, man. I always loved the organ.
You are one of those organists that you just know how to make that thing sing.
Oh wow, man. Honestly, God just put me around the right people, and I had an interest to listen and glean. More was caught than taught.
Mm-hmm.
I always accredit Michael Robinson, who was our childhood, minister of music at First Pen. He has probably been the single-handedly most influential mentor in music. But Marcus Dawson, Donnie Graves,
Mm-hmm.
some others, and then those you watch and listen to from afar who weren't up close. Um, you know, I'm the product of the voices or the influences that fed me, and putting them all together, harnessing it, and infusing my own personality, I guess, is kind of how I arrive at where I am. So
All right, so I told a fib. I'm gonna ask you one more question. Do
yeah,
you?
yes, go.
And it goes back to what we were just speaking about. Do you think that there is a shortage of younger people wanting to actually play the organ? I remember we went as a church. We needed a new organ,
Mhm.
and the question was, do we get a new fancy organ or do we go with the same? Was it the Hammond B3?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, do we do it the classic? And then we ended up keeping the old Hammond. I don't have no
Yeah.
idea how old that thing is. It was the organ they had. I've come to my church when I was 5 years old, and it's the same organ they've
Okay.
had since, and I'm 46 years old now.
Yeah,
So
gotcha.
they just had it retuned or whatever, and
Uh
refurbished.
huh. Uh
But
huh. Yeah.
do you think that there's a lack of interest in it because we have the keyboards now, as opposed to learning the intricacies of the organ?
I think to some degree, yes. If so, I think a lot of it is just because of for many of us, maybe not your church specifically or my church, but for a lot of churches, a lot of Black churches, we've gotten away from the use of organs, whether gospel organs or even classical organs, in our worship styles.
Mm-hmm.
I think in our efforts to be more mainstream, and I'm not against it, but in our efforts to be more mainstream, we've kind of indoctrinated more of a CCM approach. And so, well, CCM music doesn't feature the Hammond at all,
Mm-hmm.
and so, um, when our aim is to sing music now that's created, and most of the modern gospel artists are either trying to be R&B or some hybrid of CCM,
Mm-hmm.
or in terms of praise and worship.
Mm-hmm.
So there's very little room for the Hammond in those moments. And so I do think that there may be a decline. I can't speak with certainty. I can give my observation, And in my observation, I would say that if there is a decline, then it's due greatly to uh, folks not being exposed to it. And I think churches, we owe it. And I've heard preachers, man, I know our time ago, I've heard, preachers say, oh, the times are changing. Y'all need to sell that P3, because ain't nobody want to hear that no more. Well, that to me sounds like the rhetoric that the same preacher saying that still want to who.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so my point is that to me sounds, and I do believe in changing with the times, and I've even changed my style some, but I think that we owe it to ourselves to be ourselves, to not be stuck, but to be ourselves. And when it comes to gospel music and it comes to church music, there is a place for the Hammond organ in our tradition of church. And if we would stop feeling ashamed of it, then we might have more people to take interest in it.
I think especially in the Black gospel church, those songs had duality. They had more meaning than just the gospel Christian song.
Right.
You've heard the stories where they were the old hymns that the slaves used to sing that, let them know where to go and how to get out of bondage.
Correct.
I think, we still need to hold on to that for our history of being Black folks. Absolutely. Not just Black Christians, right, but we are more than just that. And I think like a lot of the old hymns, we're getting away from that. And I'm not even going front. I used to be in church like, why are we singing this old song right now? But it's something about when somebody plays something like It's Something in the Blood. It's something that takes me back to just seeing my dad on the pulpit and knowing the struggles that he came from and his people came from. It's great that now we have the options and abilities to go forward, but I don't think we should forget our past either.
Even the Bible tells us, man, don't forget the old landmarks. And there are ways to incorporate it and integrate them into our modern context of ministry. And that's one of the things that I want to praise our music ministry for doing throughout our history. They've always worked hard to infuse and combine and bridge the old with the new. My church is 4 or 5 generations tall. So I can't just appeal to millennials. I got 5 generations in my church, some within the same family. So we have to find a way to bridge those gaps. And I think that if we respect it, then there's enough room for everything. There's room for the keyboards and the synthesizers and the drum machines. And there's also room for the Hammond. There's room for the Allen organ. There's room for the grand piano. There's a space for everything. And if we understand that it's both and not either or, I think we will attract what we put out bait for.
All right. Well, our time is coming short. So I always ended off by asking a similar question to everybody. If you had a young up-and-comer that was looking to you for inspiration, and they came to you and they say, Pastor Ced, I'm interested in following your footsteps, what advice would you give them?
If I had only one thing to say to them, I would probably tell them, don't follow in my footsteps. Ask me how important it was for me to get to where I was going. Because my footsteps might not lead in the direction of your path. But if you can connect with who you are and know who you are, know who God is and who God is in you, then we can walk your path together. So instead of you trying to walk where I've gone, maybe what my blessing can be for you is to help you walk into the path that you are headed. And the reason that's important to me is because I don't want to create clones. I don't want to create imitators. I'm not interested in trying to raise up a generation of people who mimic what they see me do. What I want is to help instill into others the ability to discover what they were called to do. So yeah, I'm more interested in helping a person walk out their path then making them walk my own. And I think that one major key to that, again, starts with knowing God and then learning yourself and becoming okay with the person you discover.
That's great. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and get an outro, but then instead of playing my normal outro music, I'm gonna give the people a sample of you on the organ.
Wow.
Yeah, technology, bro.
It is.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to this episode of the 757 Renaissance Man. I am Sean Connors. This is Pastor Cedric Rouson, and we are out. Did you feel that? I felt that. Sir, thank you so much for coming out and taking the time out of your day to do this. I really appreciate it. I know you're not supposed to be a fan in the church community, but I am definitely a fan, man.
Wow, man, that means everything to me for you to allow me the space to be able to come and share, man. This has just been fun and grateful for the opportunity. Thank you again for just giving me the platform. I'm humbled by it, man. I really appreciate it.
I really mean what I said about, as soon as we stop, I'm about to call Pastor Sam. We're about to hook it up because I think that is something that needs to be seen and heard.
Wow. Okay. I'm down.
All right. And we're going to do a part 2 with your whole family.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
I think that'll be dope.
Sounds great.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Hug that baby for me.
Will do.
All right. Bye.